Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Prashant Kumar Sinha, and with me is Manoj Singh Rana, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. ICMR study finds indigenous COVID-19 vaccine Covaxin to be effective against double mutant strain of coronavirus. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to participate in the Leaders' Summit on Climate on Thursday. In the US, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin convicted of George Floyd's murder. All Air India flights between India and the UK to remain cancelled from 24th of April to the 30th of April. And in IPL cricket, Chennai Super Kings set a target of 220 runs for Kolkata Knight Riders in Mumbai. In other match, Sunrisers Hyderabad defeat Punjab Kings by 9 wickets in Chennai. As the number of COVID cases are on the rise again, we appeal to our listeners not to lower the guard, follow all the precautions, and all those above 45 years to get vaccinated without any hesitation. Stay safe and protected by following these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news in detail. An Indian Council of Medical Research ICMR study has found the indigenous coronavirus vaccine Covaxin to be effective against the double mutant strain of the virus. It has recently been successful in isolating and culturing the double mutant strain of SARS-CoV-2 identified in certain regions of India and several other countries. The ICMR, National Institute of Virology, have demonstrated the neutralization potential of Covaxin against the UK variant and the Brazil variant. It said Covaxin has been found to effectively neutralize the double mutant strain as well. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will participate in the Leaders' Summit on Climate on Thursday. The 2-day summit will be held virtually, and Mr. Modi will make his remarks in the session, which has the theme Our Collective Sprint to 2020. The Prime Minister was invited by US President Joe Biden to participate in this summit. Nearly 40 other world leaders are participating in the summit. They will represent countries which are members of the Major Economies Forum and those vulnerable to climate change, among others. The leaders will exchange views on climate change, enhancing climate actions, mobilizing finance towards climate mitigation and adaptation, nature-based solutions, climate security, as well as technological innovations for clean energy. They will also deliberate on how the world can align climate action with inclusive and resilient economic development while respecting national circumstances and sustainable development priorities. The summit is part of a series of global meetings focusing on climate issues being held in the run-up to the COP26 in November 2021.
In the USA, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has been convicted of murdering George Floyd. Last year, the death of 46-year-old Floyd had prompted protests against racism and police brutality in many U.S. cities and other countries. A 12-member jury found 45-year-old Chauvin guilty of all 3 charges of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. Chauvin may be jailed up to 40 years. The verdict is being seen as a milestone in the racial history of the United States. President Joe Biden said that this can be a giant step forward in the march towards justice in America. Speaking at a news conference, George Floyd's brother, Philinese, said that they are able to breathe again after the verdict, but the fight for justice was not over. On May 25, 2020, in a confrontation captured on video, Chauvin was seen pushing his knee into the neck of a handcuffed Floyd for more than 9 minutes. Chauvin and 3 fellow officers were attempting to arrest Floyd, accused of using a fake $20 note at a grocery store. Air India has informed that due to recent restrictions announced by the United Kingdom, all flights between India and the UK will remain cancelled from Saturday till the end of this month. It added that further updates regarding rescheduling, refunds and waivers will be informed in meantime. However, Air India said that it is working to schedule once-a-week flight to the UK from Delhi and Mumbai during the interval of this restriction. The national carrier has said that flight schedule from Delhi and Mumbai to the UK after the restriction period is over would also be announced in due course through its public portals and various other media platforms.
In Afghanistan, as many as 15 militants were killed as fighter aircraft struck Taliban positions and hideouts in southern Kandahar province. In a statement on Wednesday, the Defense Ministry said 5 militants have been injured in the sorties, which covered parts of the restive Panjwai district. The statement said the ground forces, backed by combat aircraft, will continue to strike the enemy hideouts elsewhere in Kandahar and its vicinity. Amidst escalating tensions between the Philippines and China, the Philippines South China Sea Task Force has said that they are deploying more ships and aircraft to protect maritime territory and resources in the nation's 200-mile exclusive economic zone EEZ. The statement added that Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte has ordered authorities to continue sovereignty patrols and intensify operations against illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing in its territorial waters. The Philippines has filed several diplomatic protests over Chinese activities in the South China Sea, with the latest accusing its neighbor of illegal fishing and massing more than 240 boats within its EEZ. This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
3 steps to stay protected and stay safe from COVID-19. Wear face mask, 2 gaz ki duri to maintain social distancing, maintain hand and face hygiene.
Welcome back to the World News. In today's Hotspot section, we are focusing on the role of India and the US in ensuring peace and stability in Afghanistan. Today, journalist Ms. Simran Sodhi is in conversation with the former diplomat Mr. Anil Badwa.
The peace and stability in Afghanistan following the US decision to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan, and also the implications and how India and the United States can contribute to the peace and the long-term stability in Afghanistan. We've seen in the recent years and almost decades how Afghanistan has been ravaged by war. We have also seen India's role in helping build Afghanistan in humanitarian assistance and in various other programs. Ambassador Wadhwa, when we see the United States ready to pull out its troops from Afghanistan, it will leave a vacuum in the country. What, in your opinion, should be the major concerns for India and the United States once this withdrawal of troops is completed?
The decision by United States to pull out of Afghanistan has been taken much earlier, but it's only now that the Biden administration has actually implemented what was already decided by the Trump administration. And in order to make sure that the United States left Afghanistan quickly as possible, the United States, in effect, started talks with the Taliban starting in 2019, using Doha as a platform. And of course, the Afghan government was not involved in this process. It's only in 2020, and after enormous amount of pressure by the United States on the current Afghan government, that the government of Ashraf Ghani spoke to the Taliban for the first time towards the third quarter of 2020. And of course, there was no agreement with the Taliban and the current government, because the Taliban now sees itself in a position of strength, and the fears that you mentioned are many. First of all, there is a fear that the Taliban would impose its will in Afghanistan and would bring about a sort of Sharia rule which they wanted to from the very beginning. Second issue is how this will have a fallout on the status of women and children in Afghanistan, on the humanitarian issues which go with it. Third issue is about the growing role of Pakistan and the use of Afghanistan as a base of terror against its neighboring countries, and that includes India, Iran as well. The worrying part is that the Russians seem to have come to the conclusion that unless they take Pakistan along, that they will also be affected by the instability that could then spring from Afghanistan into their own country. And therefore, they've gone along with the current arrangement, which gives Pakistan a sort of vantage point, along with China, who would like to use Afghanistan as an outlet for its BRI policies. and also to exploit the natural resources in Afghanistan. Therefore, in sum, what it leaves the Afghans with is nothing much at hand, very little hope for the future, and there is a big challenge now on how to manage this transition.
Mr. Wadhwa, as you pointed out about Pakistan, and we have seen there is this great concern globally that once the US troops leave and we'll also have the NATO troops withdrawing, the vacuum that is left behind makes Pakistan even stronger in the sense that Pakistan and Taliban have always had very deep ties, and Pakistan might be running a lot of regional concerns in this nation. How do you think India and the United States can counter this influence of Pakistan, which is likely to grow, especially for India, given the fact that Pakistan has used foreign soil to plan attacks against India?
The United States is not looking at it from the perspective that India looks at it, because India is next door to Pakistan and to Afghanistan and is a regional player. And as far as the United States is concerned, it is an election promise of President Biden to bring back troops from Afghanistan and to ensure that there is no more continuation of spending in Afghanistan. Because if you look at it from their perspective, $143 billion have been sunk into Afghanistan as far as there are 30,000 casualties and 2,400 fatalities in Afghanistan. And then on top of that, there is no improvement they see in the human development, which is very limited on the ground. The future prospects from their point of view remain very mixed. So the stakes for the United States in this region are not very high. And all they're interested in at the moment is to make sure that the withdrawal is completed as quickly as possible. Therefore, it is left to India, and I think that has been a subject of discussions between India and the United States, especially between Special Representative Zalmay Khalilzad and our leadership, as to how to manage this transition in Afghanistan. The United States sees India as a major player for the future in Afghanistan, as a force of stability because of the influence that India enjoys on currently the two factions of the government, which is Ashraf Ghani and his chief rival Abdullah Abdullah. But at the same time, India has also done a lot of development work in Afghanistan. It does not have a military presence, but at the same time, the cultural influence of India through its films and the exchange that has taken place with Afghans in the past has given it an ideal platform. Indians are liked in Afghanistan, and therefore whatever India says is listened to by the current government. I'm not sure whether the same applies to Taliban. So the United States would like India to bring about a meeting of minds between all the factions, which is a tall order. At the same time, the United States would like to see India as a peace broker by talking to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and Russia in the region, all of them players in Afghanistan. Secondly, use its textual and political security, force reform, building democratic institutions in a transiting Afghanistan. And finally, of course, the United States would like the Indian civil society to actually talk to the Afghan civil society in order that they become strong enough to influence whoever is in government or in power in Afghanistan. So there are a lot of asks as far as India is concerned. And of course, India would like to preserve its influence and the investments that it has made. At least $3 billion have gone into investments in Afghanistan over time. And again, the support to medium and long-term foreign aid. For that, again, India would be seen as a fulcrum around which the others would rally. So there is an expectation from India that will provide the much-needed stability as a player and a partner of Afghanistan. But on the United States part also, I must say that total withdrawal is just not feasible. I think if the situation deteriorates in Afghanistan very rapidly, then of course the United States Congress will have to think twice and perhaps come back to Afghanistan in some form to prop up the government, or at least to stop the bloodshed if that happens in Afghanistan. So we have a very grim scenario in future.
Mr. Wadhwa, there's also been this talk that one of the reasons the U.S. wants to pull out of Afghanistan is also we look at the Biden administration and a changing world order. And it seems like the United States' focus in foreign policy today seems to be more dealing with an aggressive and assertive Russia, dealing with countries like North Korea and Iran, who both have nuclear programs, with the rise of China. Do you feel that this has also got to do with the United States also rethinking where it it wants to focus as far as its foreign policy priorities are concerned? And maybe Afghanistan doesn't make it to that priority list today.
The foreign priorities of United States today have changed and the focus has changed. The United States is no longer looking at Middle East, leave alone Afghanistan, with the same focus that it used to earlier. Its focus now is how to contain China in the Indo-Pacific and at the same time deal with an aggressive Russia with whom it seems to have developed a lot of antagonism over a number of policies as they see directed against the United States. So we are seeing actually a United States which is now going to adopt a more belligerent and competitive stance as far as Russia and China is concerned. That leaves very little room for places like Afghanistan to be focused upon. So it's up to the regional countries and up to Afghans themselves to make the best of the situation.
Mr. Wadhwa, we also have other players in the future of Afghanistan. We have China, we have Russia, we have Iran. Do you feel that India's relationships, bilateral ties, say with Iran, with Russia, these will also play a very important part in how India is further involved in the future of Afghanistan?
Each of these players have their own interests in Afghanistan. If you take Iran, for instance, it would not like Afghanistan to be used, for example, by Pakistan to destabilize Iran. That's the main issue there. Also to make sure that its connectivity projects with Afghanistan proceed so that it develops economically. Thirdly, also to make sure that the minorities with links to Iran are not mistreated by the Taliban. And this was the main concern that they had when the Taliban were in power earlier. The National Alliance then was supported by Iran, India, and the Russians. With Russia, the main concern for the Russians in Afghanistan is the return to instability and terrorist elements in Afghanistan and the increase in ISIS presence in the country. And by making sure that they are on the right side of whoever governs Afghanistan, they are hoping that the efforts of the ISIS are not directed at Russia's underbelly and they are not affected by the instability and terrorism which can be propped up in Afghanistan if there is a wrong government in place. As far as India is concerned, it would not like Afghanistan to be used as a territory from where Pakistan can once again start proxy wars against India and not train terrorists in Afghanistan who can then be used against India in Kashmir and in other places. And as far as China is concerned, they would like peace and quiet to be prevalent in Afghanistan in their own interest so that their own restive region of Xinjiang is not affected. And for that, they need the support of Pakistan. So in all, I think Pakistan has emerged as a major player due to not its benign influence, but due to its nuisance value and also because of the fact that it has linkages with Taliban, which it can use for nefarious purposes. So we have a very volatile situation, a very dynamic and a moving situation, and therefore India needs to play its cards extremely well in this process.
Mr. Wadhwa, we also saw that it was in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks that the US troops landed in Afghanistan and the purpose initially was to fight off and finish Al-Qaeda. There's also this feeling prevalent today that the transnational terrorist threat that the US felt from Afghanistan has now ceased. And maybe this is now time for the United States to pull out its troops and focus on other conflict zones in the world. Would you agree with this analysis that the transnational terrorist threat to the United States from Afghanistan is kind of over now and the US can get its troops home, but they're committing that they will continue to play a humanitarian role in Kabul and they will continue helping Kabul? Do you think that is a workable solution in the near future?
The presence of United States and NATO troops in Afghanistan on the ground who were actually keeping a check on Taliban. And between 2017 to 19, if we look at the scenario, we find that the Taliban forces were pushed and the Afghan government got an upper hand. They gained a lot during that period in Afghanistan, mainly from the support and the presence of the United States and the NATO troops there. At the same time, there was development work being carried out by countries like India, which also helped the government. However, two issues have directly impacted the situation. One is the fact that in the United States itself, President Trump, in order to come back and win the elections, which happened last year, was very keen to have a popular foreign policy step. And one of the foreign policy steps that were very popular or seen to be popular at that time was the complete withdrawal of the United States from Afghanistan, where he could tell the people and the Congress that he has brought back troops and that the wasteful expenditure, in inverted commas, of $143 billion sunk into Afghanistan would soon come to an end, and that United States forces who had lost their lives in Afghanistan would no longer be doing so. So, guided by that motivation, Zalmay Khalilzad was appointed, as I said, to open up talks with the Taliban in order to make sure that there could be a transitional government in Afghanistan, which is a pipe dream in my view. The Taliban and the current government do not see eye to eye. In fact, the current government itself is divided. Afghanistan is divided politically, and there will never be any agreement in the foreseeable future on a transition government in which the current government steps down, because it's not a military government, it's not an imposed government, it's an elected government. And therefore, their demand is that they should remain in power. And at the end of it, if there is new elections, then of course they would be willing to cut down their term and agree to that process. So this is where we are at the moment. There's no meeting of minds on that. I don't see that happening by 9th of September, which is the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks, that there would be any agreement reached. And if that agreement is not reached, then the United States leaves Afghanistan. We are in for a period of instability in which we will see further attacks being intensified on civilians, on urban centers, and the people to suffer will be the people of Afghanistan.
And in the coming days, we will continue to follow the developments in Afghanistan with the U.S. decision to pull out and India's role and the role played by the U.S. With these thoughts, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga has postponed his India visit in the light of the resurgence of COVID cases. Mr. Suga was scheduled to visit India later this month. Both India and Japan have also decided to postpone their foreign and defense ministerial talks, which are scheduled for this weekend in Tokyo due to a rapid increase in coronavirus cases in both the countries. Japan has recently reported fresh spike in number of coronavirus cases, especially in cities like Tokyo and Osaka.
China on Wednesday parried questions on India's assertion that issues related to complete disengagement and situation at the LAC cannot be swept under the carpet and should not be treated as a matter of perspective. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said on Wednesday at his media briefing in Beijing that it was committed to maintain peace and stability along the line of actual control LAC, as it urged India to put the boundary issue at an appropriate position and meet it halfway for the long-term development of bilateral ties. In a straight talk, India's ambassador to China, Vikram Mishri, in his recent address to the India-China Dialogue Forum said that the tendency to characterize issues related to complete disengagement as a matter of perspective is inadvisable. He also questioned and reminded China of the significance of the consensus reached between leaders of the two countries to maintain peace along the LAC. He further said that complete disengagement of troops in eastern Ladakh is necessary to rebuild bilateral ties strained by the serious incidents that happened last year at the LAC. In his address, Mr. Mishri said the sustainable solution to the present difficulties in the Sino-India relations must be based on mutual sensitivity and respect and paves the way for maximizing our mutual interests. He also noted that the importance of the two sides having maintained a sustained diplomatic and military dialogue in attempting to resolve issues which have helped in achieving substantial disengagement of the two forces. Sri Lanka on Wednesday marked the second anniversary of the Easter Sunday bombings with religious ceremonies. The bombings carried out by extremist groups targeted 3 churches during Easter Sunday services in 2019. Catholic churches conducted prayer services after 2 minutes of silence in remembrance of the 271 people killed in the multiple explosions. Other religious groups held similar events. A multi-religious remembrance service attended by Buddhist, Hindu and Muslim clergy and diplomats was held at the St. Anthony's Catholic Shrine in the capital, Colombo.
In IPL cricket, Chennai Super Kings have set a target of 221 runs for Kolkata Knight Riders in Mumbai. In reply, Kolkata Knight Riders were 160 for 7 in 15 overs when reports last came in. Earlier, KKR won the toss and opted to field. Here is a report from the sports desk.
Sunrisers Hyderabad have defeated Punjab Kings by 9 wickets to finally open their account in the Indian Premier League points table at the Chennai's M.A. Chidambaram Stadium. Chasing a paltry total of 120, Hyderabad skipper David Warner put a 73 runs opening partnership along with the informed Johnny Bairstow. Warner got out for 37, but man of the match Bairstow finished the work with New Zealand skipper Kane Williamson alongside in 18.4 overs. Earlier, Sunrisers bowlers, led by left-arm pacer Khalil Ahmed's 3 for 21, skittled out Punjab Kings for 120 in 19.4 overs. In the other sports news, the breakaway European Super League announced by 12 elite sides on Sunday has effectively collapsed after Atletico Madrid, AC Milan and Inter Milan joined the 6-strong English contingent in quitting the project. Now only Spanish giants Real Madrid and Barcelona remain alongside Juventus of Italy. Jakarta Asian Games champion in men's 1500 meters, Jenson Johnson has virtually ruled himself out of the Tokyo Olympics after failing to recover in time from COVID-19 related complications. Vaibhav Srivastav, Sports Desk, All India Radio, World News.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Washington Post writes that Afghanistan pullout may spur mixed emotions for veterans and families. Reporting on the Derek Chauvin trial, Washington Post writes that the rare murder conviction of the ex-officer sends message on police violence. Wall Street Journal reports that Pfizer identifies fake COVID shots aboard as criminals exploit vaccine demand. The Guardian reports that the new EU target to curb carbon emissions by at least 55% disappoints experts. Globe and the Mail writes that Myanmar protesters facing new safety concerns as military enacts new regulations over hosting guests. Gulf Times reports that Doha Metro announces green initiative to celebrate the Earth Day.
9 Bangladeshis feature in the Forbes 30 Under 30 list of innovators in 10 industries for Asia. Forbes announced its 6th annual 30 Under 30 Asia list for 2021 on Tuesday, featuring 300 young entrepreneurs, leaders and trailblazers across Asia. The list includes people who are finding new opportunities amidst the challenging environment brought out by the COVID pandemic. The 9 Bangladeshis have been included under the categories Enterprise Technology, Social Impact and Retail and E-Commerce. Earlier, between 2016 to 2020, 9 Bangladeshis were listed in the Forbes 30 Under 30 list for Asia. Shehzad Nutaus Priyo and Motasim Bir Rahman co-founded Gaze, which builds APIs for visual recognition with AI supporting features. The Awareness 360 is an NGO founded by Shomi Chaudhary and Rizvi Arifin, which works on personal hygiene issues like hand washing, sanitation, etc. A quick look at the headlines once again. ICMR study finds indigenous COVID-19 vaccine Covaxin to be effective against double mutant strain of coronavirus. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to participate in the Leaders Summit on Climate on Thursday. In the US, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin convicted of George Floyd's murder. All Air India flights between India and the UK to remain cancelled from the 24th of April to the 30th of April. And in IPL cricket, Chennai Super Kings set a target of 220 runs for Kolkata Knight Riders in Mumbai. In other match, Sunrisers Hyderabad defeat Punjab Kings by 9 wickets in Chennai. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let's listen to his favorite bhajan Vaishnavajan by artists from Mongolia.
Vaishnava Jan
with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.